Rain poured relentlessly over downtown Chicago, turning the busy streets into rivers of shimmering lights. Cars splashed through puddles without slowing down. Pedestrians hurried beneath umbrellas, avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked like they needed help. In the middle of the storm, a young woman carefully balanced a large insulated delivery bag on the back of her scooter. Her name was Emma Carter. She was only 20 years old, 7 months pregnant, and still working 12-hour shifts delivering food because every dollar mattered. Her oversized rain jacket hid the curve of her stomach, but it couldn't hide the exhaustion written across her face. Her hands trembled slightly from the cold as she checked another order on her phone. 34 minutes. Late? Agon, she whispered to herself. Please don't be angry. Emma wasn't afraid of the rain. She wasn't afraid of long hours. She wasn't even afraid of giving birth while struggling to pay rent. The thing she feared most was disappointing strangers. Because disappointed strangers often became cruel strangers. She started the scooter again and drove toward one of the richest neighborhoods in the city. Massive mansions stood behind elegant iron gates. Luxury cars lined spotless driveways. Every house looked larger than the apartment building where Emma rented a tiny studio. She parked beside a marble staircase leading to a modern glass mansion. The app instructed her to leave the food at the front door, sill. Or so she thought. As Emma climbed the slippery stairs, one foot missed the edge. She stumbled. The delivery bag slipped from her shoulder. The drinks crashed onto the expensive white marble. Coffee splashed everywhere. One container burst open. The customer's gourmet breakfast scattered across the entrance. Emma froze. No. Before she could clean it up, the front door swung open. A woman wearing a designer silk robe stared at the mess. What is this? Emma immediately bent down. I'm so sorry. I slipped because... I don't care why. The woman folded her arms. Do you know how expensive this breakfast was? I'm really sorry. I'll contact support. They'll replace. You people always have excuses. The words struck harder than the rain. You people. Emma lowered her eyes. I'll pay for it. The woman laughed. With what? Your delivery salary? Another voice echoed behind her. A teenage boy stepped outside holding a phone. Mom, wait. Instead of helping, he started recording. Look at this. A pregnant delivery girl just destroyed our breakfast. Within seconds, the camera pointed directly at Emma's face. She tried hiding behind her wet hair. Please don't record me. The boy grinned. Why? Embarrassed. His mother smirked. Maybe next time, she'll learn to do her job. Neighbors walking dogs slowed down. A gardener paused his work. 2 joggers stopped. Everyone watched. Nobody helped. Emma quietly gathered the ruined containers into a plastic bag. Rain mixed with tears running down her cheeks. I'm sorry. She whispered it again and again. As if apologizing enough could erase humiliation. Finally, she stood. I'll report the damage through the app. The woman snatched the delivery bag. This company hires anyone. Before Emma could respond, a deep male voice interrupted. Is there a problem? Everyone turned. An elderly security guard from the neighboring estate approached, carrying a large umbrella. He looked at Emma, then at the destroyed breakfast. Then at the phone recording her. Without saying another word, he walked straight to Emma and held the umbrella over her instead of himself. You'll catch pneumonia standing in this rain. Emma blinked. I'm okay. No. He smiled kindly. You're carrying another life. His simple words almost made her cry. The rich woman rolled her eyes. This doesn't concern you, the guard calmly answered. I've worked here for 25 years. I've seen wealthy people. And I've seen people with class. They're not always the same. Silence spread across the driveway. The teenage boy slowly lowered his phone. The woman crossed her arms. So now you're defending incompetence? The guard ignored her. Instead, he reached into his own wallet. He removed several $100 bills. He handed them to Emma. Take the day off. Emma immediately stepped back. I can't accept that. You can. No. I haven't earned it. The old man's smile grew warmer. Kindness doesn't have to be earned. For the first time that day, someone looked at Emma like she mattered. Her lips trembled. Thank you. Just then, her phone vibrated violently. Another delivery notification. She stared at the screen. Her customer rating had dropped again. 1 star, another complaint. Her account warning flashed in bright red. One more serious complaint, and she'd lose the only income she had. Emma quietly placed the money back into the guard's hand. I really appreciate you. But if I stop working, she gently touched her stomach. My baby doesn't eat tomorrow. The old guard looked heartbroken. Without another word, he opened his lunch container, a simple homemade turkey sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. It's all I have. Emma hesitated. I can't take your lunch. He chuckled softly. I'm 72. If I miss one meal, I'll survive. But that little one, he pointed toward her belly, needs someone to think ahead. Emma finally accepted, not because she wanted charity, because someone had shared dignity with it. Across the street, inside the second-floor office of a towering black glass corporate headquarters, a man stood silently before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-soaked city. Alexander Reed, 32 years old, founder and CEO of Reed Global Holdings, one of the youngest billionaires in America. His assistants feared him. Executives respected him. Competitors avoided him. The business world called him the ICE CEO, cold, precise, untouchable. His phone buzzed, one unread message, from a private number. The message contained only a single photo, a pregnant delivery girl standing in heavy rain, holding an old security guard's lunch. Alexander's eyes narrowed, then widened. His breathing stopped. His hands slowly tightened around the phone. He whispered one name. Emma. Alexander Reed's fingers tightened around his phone. The photo refused to leave his eyes. Emma, standing alone in the rain. Her delivery jacket was soaked. Her shoes were covered in mud. One hand protected her stomach. The other held a small lunchbox given to her by an elderly security guard. For several long seconds, the most powerful CEO in the room couldn't breathe. His executive team continued discussing a multi-billion-dollar merger. If we sign before Friday, the stock. Alexander suddenly raised one hand. Silence. Every executive froze. His assistant, Grace, looked confused. Sir? Alexander didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the picture. The timestamp showed it had been taken less than 5 minutes ago. His voice turned cold. Who sent this? Grace checked the private number. It's from our security network, sir. Alexander slowly looked up. Explain. Our neighborhood surveillance AI flagged a familiar face. Since Mrs. Reed's profile is protected, the system automatically forwarded the image to your private number. Every executive exchanged nervous glances. Mrs. Reed? Most of them had never even heard the CEO admit he was married. Alexander had kept his personal life hidden from the world for years. No interviews. No family photos, no social media, nothing. Grace continued carefully. The location is only 11 minutes away. Alexander grabbed his coat. Cancel everything. One director immediately stood. But, sir, investors from London are already waiting. Alexander didn't even look back. They can wait. The merger can wait. The board can wait. My wife cannot. The room fell completely silent. For the first time in company history, Alexander Reed walked out of an executive meeting before it ended. Outside, a matte black convoy was already waiting. 6 luxury SUVs, private security, drivers, bodyguards. Alexander climbed into the first vehicle. Drive. The driver asked, office or residence, sir? Alexander's voice became sharper than anyone had ever heard. To my wife. The convoy sped through downtown traffic. Inside the SUV, Alexander stared at the photograph again. His mind drifted back 8 months. Emma hadn't always been a delivery driver. She had been studying nursing while working evenings at a small bookstore. They met by accident, not at a glamorous gala, not during a business conference, but inside a quiet hospital waiting room. Alexander had been visiting the elderly woman who had raised him after his parents died. Emma was there every evening, reading stories to children in the cancer ward. She wasn't being paid. She simply volunteered. One night, Alexander asked, "Why do you spend so much time here?" Emma smiled. "Because sick children deserve happy memories. Money can't buy those." That sentence stayed with him. Over the following months, their paths crossed again. A coffee shop, a bookstore, a charity event, a city park. Every conversation felt effortless. Emma never asked what he earned, never searched his name, never cared about luxury. When he finally revealed he owned a company, he simply said, "I run a business." Emma laughed. So do thousands of people. She treated him exactly the same. That was something Alexander had never experienced before. Months later, they married quietly. Only a judge, two witnesses, no media, no billion-dollar wedding, no headlines. It was Emma's idea. "I don't want cameras. I just want us." Alexander happily agreed. But after the wedding, things changed. His company became the target of hostile investors, corporate spies, kidnapping threats, anonymous blackmail. His security team warned him, "If the public discovers Mrs. Reed's identity, she'll become the easiest way to reach you." Alexander made a painful decision. He asked Emma to keep their marriage private until the threats ended. She agreed, not because she liked secrecy, because she loved him. Only a handful of people knew the truth. His lawyer, his head of security, his personal assistant, no one else, not even the board of directors. The convoy suddenly stopped. Alexander looked outside. Traffic, hundreds of cars. The driver apologized. "Sir, there's an accident ahead." Alexander glanced at the navigation. 900 yards remained. Without hesitation, he opened the SUV door. His bodyguards panicked. "Sir," ignoring them completely. Alexander stepped into the pouring rain. Then he ran. The billionaire CEO sprinted down the sidewalk like an ordinary man. People stared, drivers honked. Nobody recognized him beneath the rain. Meanwhile, Emma completed another delivery, then another. Every step became harder. Her back ached. Her feet were swollen. The baby kicked gently. She smiled despite the pain. "Easy, little one. I know. I'm trying." Her phone rang. It was her landlord. "Emma, your rent is already late." "I know. I'll have it by Monday." "You said that last week." "I promise. If I don't receive payment, you'll have to leave." The call ended. Emma stood quietly beneath a bus stop shelter. She closed her eyes. For one brief moment, she allowed herself to cry. Not loudly, just enough to release everything she had been holding inside. Then she wiped away every tear, straightened her jacket, picked up another order, and kept walking. Across the street, the elderly security guard watched her leave. He quietly shook his head. "She's stronger than most millionaires." At that exact moment, a familiar black SUV pulled up beside him. The rear door opened. Alexander Reed stepped out, soaked from head to toe. The old guard recognized him immediately. "Mr. Reed?" Alexander didn't waste a second. "The young pregnant delivery girl. Where is she?" The guard pointed toward the next intersection. "She just left." Alexander looked in the direction. Among hundreds of umbrellas, he spotted a small figure in a yellow delivery jacket, walking alone, completely unaware that the most powerful man in the city was running toward her. Alexander Reed pushed through the crowded sidewalk, his dress shoes splashing through puddles as rain poured relentlessly over the city. People glanced at him in confusion. A man in an expensive tailored suit, running through the storm, ignoring the black SUVs and frantic bodyguards trying to catch up behind him. But Alexander noticed none of it. His eyes searched only for one person. Emma, just ahead. She carefully carried another delivery bag, walking slower than usual. One hand rested against her lower back while the other gently supported her growing baby bump. She paused for a moment and took a deep breath. The baby kicked again. Emma smiled weakly. "I know, little one," she whispered. "Just a few more deliveries." Before she could take another step, a familiar voice called out behind her. Emma! She froze. Slowly turning around, she saw Alexander standing in the rain, completely soaked. Her eyes widened. Alex? Without caring who was watching, Alexander crossed the distance between them and wrapped his arms around her. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Emma could feel his heart racing. She had never seen him like this before. She gently pulled back. What happened? You shouldn't be here. Alexander looked at her rain-soaked jacket, then at her swollen feet, then at the delivery bag digging into her shoulder. Pain filled his eyes. You've been working like this? Emma gave a small smile. It's only temporary. You promised me you would rest, and you promised me your business problems would be over soon. Her words weren't angry. They were simply tired. Alexander lowered his head. I failed you. Emma immediately shook hers. No, you've never failed me. I just didn't want to sit at home while everything depended on you. She reached for his hand. I wanted to help. Alexander stared at her fingers. They were red from the cold, rough from constant work. The hands that once dreamed of becoming a nurse were now carrying food through storms. He could barely speak. I'm so sorry. Emma squeezed his hand. We'll get through this. Before Alexander could answer, a loud voice interrupted. Well, look who's back. The woman from the mansion stepped out of a luxury SUV parked nearby. Her teenage son stood beside her, still holding his phone. She laughed when she saw Alexander. So your unemployed boyfriend came to rescue you? Several nearby pedestrians stopped walking. The son smirked. Maybe he wants free leftovers too. Emma immediately stepped forward. Please, let's just go. She knew Alexander hated unnecessary attention, but today, he didn't move. The woman looked him up and down. Nice suit. You probably borrowed it. Some people chuckled. Alexander calmly removed his wet jacket and placed it around Emma's shoulders. Then he quietly asked, Emma, is this the woman? Emma hesitated. She didn't want more trouble. Finally, she nodded once. Yes. Alexander's expression became unreadable. His bodyguards had finally arrived. Surrounding the area at a respectful distance, the woman noticed them. Her smile faded. She pointed toward Alexander. Who are these people? Before anyone answered, another convoy turned the corner, then another. Black luxury SUVs lined the street one after another. People began pulling out their phones. What's happening? Is someone important here? The teenage boy slowly lowered his camera. The first SUV door opened. A sharply dressed man stepped out. It was Michael Harris, Chief Legal Officer of Reed Global Holdings. Then came Grace, Alexander's executive assistant. Behind them walked senior executives, security directors, and corporate staff. Each one moved with urgency. As soon as they reached Alexander, every single person stopped. Then, in perfect unison, they bowed their heads. Good afternoon, Mr. Reed. The street fell silent. The woman blinked. Mr. Reed? Grace looked at Emma with relief. Mrs. Reed, we've been searching everywhere. The delivery bag slipped from the woman's hands. Her face turned completely pale. No, that can't be. Michael turned toward the crowd. His voice was calm but carried authority. For those recording, allow me to introduce Mr. Alexander Reed, founder and chief executive officer of Reed Global Holdings. Gasps spread through the street. Someone whispered, the billionaire? That's him? Another person quickly searched his name online. Within seconds, photos matched perfectly. The teenage boy's face lost all color. His phone shook in his hands. He replayed the video he had recorded only an hour earlier. The video showing himself mocking the CEO's wife. Emma looked down, embarrassed by the sudden attention. Alexander gently lifted her chin. You never have to hide again. Tears filled Emma's eyes. I never wanted any of this. I know. You only wanted a peaceful life. She nodded. Alexander carefully placed his hand on her stomach. Our child deserves that too. The elderly security guard slowly walked over. He smiled warmly. I see your husband finally found you. Alexander turned toward him. You're the one who shared your lunch. The old man shrugged. It wasn't much. It was everything. Alexander extended his hand. Thank you for treating my wife with the kindness she deserved. The old guard shook his hand. I didn't know who she was. Alexander smiled. That's exactly why it mattered. Behind them, the woman who had insulted Emma struggled to speak. I didn't know. Alexander slowly turned toward her. His expression remained calm, but his eyes had become ice. You didn't know she was my wife. He paused. Yet you believed she deserved humiliation. The woman couldn't answer. Her son quietly deleted the recording. Too late. Several witnesses had already saved copies. Alexander looked toward Michael. Secure every video. Yes, sir. And find every witness immediately. Michael nodded. It will be done. Emma gently touched Alexander's arm. Alex. They've learned their lesson. Alexander looked at her, then back at the crowd. His voice remained steady. No, Emma. They've only learned who you are. They still haven't learned how they should treat people. The entire street became silent once again. No one dared to speak. No one dared to look away, because everyone suddenly realized this story was only just beginning. The rain finally began to slow. No one moved. Luxury SUVs lined both sides of the street while pedestrians stood frozen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The billionaire CEO, standing beside a pregnant delivery girl, calling her his wife. Emma looked around nervously. Dozens of phones were pointed in their direction. She quietly tugged on Alexander's sleeve. Alex, everyone is watching. Alexander gently took her hand. Then let them watch. For months, you've carried this burden alone. I'm done letting you suffer in silence. Grace stepped forward, holding a large umbrella over Emma. Mrs. Reed, the doctor has been trying to reach us. Emma's face changed. The doctor? Grace nodded. You missed today's prenatal appointment. Emma lowered her eyes. I couldn't afford to lose another day's income. Alexander closed his eyes for a brief moment. Every word hurt more than the last. His wife. Skipping medical appointments to deliver food. Because she was worried about money. Money. The one thing he had more of than he could ever spend. He whispered to himself, never again. Meanwhile, the woman from the mansion suddenly rushed toward Emma. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Emma looked at her quietly. There was no anger in her eyes, only exhaustion. You didn't need to know who I was. The woman froze. Emma continued softly. You only needed to remember I was human. Those simple words hit harder than any insult ever could. Several people nearby lowered their heads in shame. The teenage boy stepped forward next. His hands trembled as he held out his phone. I deleted the video. Emma asked gently, why did you record me in the first place? The boy couldn't answer. After several seconds, he whispered, I thought it was funny. Emma smiled sadly. It wasn't. The teenager felt tears forming in his eyes. For the first time, he understood. Not because she was the CEO's wife, because he finally saw the pain on her face. The elderly security guard quietly watched from nearby. A small smile crossed his face. Sometimes, the greatest lessons came without shouting. Just then, Michael Harris approached Alexander with a tablet. Sir, our media monitoring team has found the original video. Alexander looked at the screen. Within less than an hour, the clip had already gained hundreds of thousands of views. The title read Pregnant Delivery Girl Destroys Rich Customers' Breakfast. Thousands of comments filled the page. Some mocked Emma. Others defended her. But none of them knew the truth, Michael asked. Should we issue legal notices? Alexander stared silently at the screen. Then he handed the tablet back. No. Michael looked surprised. No? Alexander shook his head. Not yet. He looked toward Emma. She deserves to tell her own story. Emma immediately shook her head. I don't want revenge. I don't want headlines. I don't want people attacking them because of me. Alexander smiled gently. That's exactly why people need to hear your voice. Emma sighed. I just wanted to work honestly. I never wanted anyone to know I was married to a billionaire. Alexander nodded. I know, and that's one of the reasons I fell in love with you. Grace couldn't help smiling. Even the bodyguards exchanged quiet glances. For years, they had only known the cold, emotionless CEO. Standing beside Emma, he looked like a completely different man. Suddenly, an older woman pushed through the crowd carrying a grocery bag. She looked at Emma, then at Alexander. Finally, she walked directly toward Emma. Without saying a word, she hugged her. Emma looked surprised. I'm sorry, the woman whispered. I wasn't there today, but years ago, I was that struggling pregnant mother. My husband left. I worked 3 jobs. People laughed at me too. Tears rolled down her face. I wish someone had stood beside me the way your husband stood beside you. Emma hugged her back tightly. You survived. The woman smiled through her tears. So will you. Around them, the crowd slowly began clapping, not because of Alexander, not because of his wealth, but because they had witnessed something rare. Kindness, compassion, humanity. One by one, people lowered their phones. Several walked over to apologize to Emma. Others quietly thanked the elderly security guard for helping her. The atmosphere that had been filled with mockery only an hour earlier had completely changed. Alexander turned toward his head of security. I want every delivery company in this city reviewed. The man nodded. Yes, sir. No pregnant employee should ever feel forced to choose between healthcare and food. We'll create emergency assistance programs. Michael quickly added, we can partner with local hospitals as well. Alexander nodded. Start tonight. Emma looked at him. You don't have to do all this because of me. Alexander smiled. I'm not doing it because you're my wife. I'm doing it because thousands of women are living the life you just lived. Emma gently rested her head against his shoulder. For the first time in months, she finally felt safe. But across the street, inside a parked black sedan, a man wearing dark sunglasses lowered a pair of binoculars. He quietly spoke into his phone. So, the CEO has finally revealed his wife. A cold voice answered from the other end. Good. We've been waiting for this. The man watched Alexander and Emma drive away in the convoy. Then he smiled. Now, we know exactly how to hurt him. Far away, unaware that someone had just declared them targets, Alexander gently held Emma's hand inside the SUV. He looked at her baby bump and whispered, I promise, no matter who comes after us, I'll protect both of you. Emma smiled softly. She believed him. Neither of them realized their greatest battle was only beginning. The convoy moved quietly through the rain-soaked streets of Chicago. Inside the armored SUV, silence filled the cabin. Emma rested her head against the window, watching the city lights blur into long golden streaks. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about delivery deadlines, or customer ratings, or overdue rent. She simply held Alexander's hand. Neither of them wanted to let go. Alexander looked at her swollen feet. His heart sank. He slowly knelt in front of her. Alex, what are you doing? Without answering, he carefully removed her soaked shoes. Emma immediately tried to stop him. No, they're dirty. Alexander looked into her eyes. So? He gently dried her feet with a clean towel from the emergency medical kit inside the SUV. One of the bodyguards quietly looked away. Pretending not to notice, Grace smiled to herself. The world's most feared CEO was carefully massaging his wife's tired feet. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You've never done this before. Alexander smiled sadly. I've never realized how much you've been carrying alone. He noticed several painful blisters. His hands trembled. These? How long have you had them? Emma laughed softly. I stopped counting weeks ago. Alexander closed his eyes. Every blister felt like another failure. He had built billion-dollar companies, negotiated impossible deals, saved struggling corporations. Yet somehow, he hadn't seen the pain of the person he loved most. I'm sorry. Emma gently touched his face. No more apologies. I don't need a perfect husband. I just need you. Alexander kissed her forehead. You'll always have me. 30 minutes later. The convoy entered the private gates of Reed Manor. Emma stared through the window. She had only visited the estate once before their quiet wedding. Since then, she had insisted on living in her tiny apartment to keep their marriage hidden. Now, the massive iron gates slowly opened. Beautiful gardens stretched across dozens of acres. Elegant fountains sparkled beneath soft lights. The mansion looked more like a palace than a home. Emma whispered, "It still feels unreal." Alexander smiled. "It's only a house," she laughed. "No, it's an entire neighborhood." For the first time that day, Alexander laughed too. The staff waiting at the entrance smiled. They hadn't heard their CEO laugh in years. As soon as the SUV stopped, nearly 40 household employees lined the front steps. The head butler stepped forward. "Welcome home, Mr. Reed." Then he looked at Emma. His eyes softened. "And welcome home, Mrs. Reed." Every employee bowed respectfully. Emma looked overwhelmed. "You don't have to." The elderly housekeeper smiled. "We've been waiting a long time to say those words." Emma felt tears forming again. For months, she had hidden, pretended, worked alone. Now, for the first time, she finally felt like she belonged somewhere. Inside the mansion, Alexander led her into a warm living room with a crackling fireplace. The scent of fresh bread filled the air. Chef Maria stepped out from the kitchen. She looked at Emma with concern. "My goodness, you're so thin." Emma smiled awkwardly. "I've been busy." Maria shook her head. "No, you've been skipping meals." Without waiting for permission, she disappeared into the kitchen. 10 minutes later, the dining table overflowed with healthy food, fresh soup, grilled salmon, vegetables, fruit, warm bread, fresh juice. Emma stared in disbelief. "This is all for me?" Maria crossed her arms. "No, it's for my newest granddaughter." She pointed toward Emma's baby bump. Everyone laughed. Emma smiled brighter than she had in months. While Emma ate, Alexander walked into his private office. His smile disappeared instantly. Michael Harris was already waiting. "So?" Alexander asked. Michael placed several files on the desk. "We investigated today's incident. The woman who humiliated Mrs. Reed is named Victoria Langston." Alexander remained silent. "Anything else?" "Her husband owns Langston Luxury Developments." Alexander recognized the name immediately, one of Reed Global's largest construction contractors. Michael continued. "They've been requesting a $1 billion renewal contract." Alexander slowly sat down. For several long seconds, he said nothing. Finally, he looked up. "Did Victoria know Emma was my wife?" "No." "Did Emma receive poor treatment because she was my wife?" "No." Michael understood where this conversation was heading. Alexander spoke calmly. "Then this isn't personal." Michael nodded. "It isn't." Alexander folded his hands. "Review every contract. If Langston Developments fails to meet our ethical standards, they lose the bid." Michael smiled slightly. "So we're judging them by the same rules as everyone else?" Alexander nodded. "Exactly. I won't punish someone because they insulted my wife. I'll judge them by the character they've already shown." Michael quietly admired the answer. This wasn't revenge. It was accountability. Meanwhile, upstairs, Emma wandered into the nursery. She froze. The room was beautiful. Soft cream-colored walls, a white crib, tiny clothes folded neatly, stuffed animals, a rocking chair beside the window. Emma covered her mouth. "You." Alexander had been preparing everything. For months, even while they were living apart. A small envelope rested on the crib. Her name was written across the front. She slowly opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means you've finally come home. Every toy in this room, every blanket, every little pair of shoes was chosen while imagining the day we'd finally become a family under one roof. I know these past months have been lonely. I know I've asked you to carry burdens no wife should ever carry. But not one day passed without me thinking about you. And our baby. I don't know if our child will call me a good father, but I promise this. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become one. Love, Alexander. By the time Emma reached the last line, she couldn't hold back her tears. She hugged the letter tightly against her chest. Downstairs, Alexander looked up toward the nursery window. He smiled softly. He didn't know if Emma had found the letter yet, but he hoped she finally understood. She had never spent a single day forgotten. Outside the estate gates, a black sedan remained parked beneath the trees. The mysterious man watched the mansion through binoculars. He spoke quietly into his phone. "They're together now." The cold voice on the other end replied, "Good. Tomorrow, phase 1 begins." The call ended. The man smiled. Inside the brightly lit mansion, no one knew that danger had already arrived at their doorstep. The first rays of sunlight stretched across Reed Manor. For the first time in months, Emma woke up without an alarm. No delivery app buzzing. No frantic race to accept orders. No fear of losing another customer rating. She slowly opened her eyes and instinctively placed a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked. A gentle smile appeared on her face. "Good morning, little one." There was a soft knock at the bedroom door. "Mrs. Reed?" It was the housekeeper, Margaret. "May I come in?" Emma sat up. "Of course." Margaret entered, carrying a breakfast tray filled with fresh fruit, oatmeal, warm pancakes, orange juice, and herbal tea. "I wasn't sure what you'd like, so Chef Maria prepared a little of everything." Emma stared at the tray. "This is too much." Margaret smiled warmly. "No, dear. For months you've been eating just enough to survive. It's time you started eating enough to live." Emma's eyes filled with tears again. She wasn't crying because of the food. She was crying because someone finally cared. Downstairs, Alexander was already in his office. His smile from the previous night had disappeared. Michael Harris entered carrying another file. "We've completed the background investigation." Alexander looked up. "The anonymous threats?" Michael nodded. "They never stopped. We believe someone has been monitoring Mrs. Reed for weeks." Alexander's expression hardened. "Weeks?" Michael placed several surveillance photos on the desk. Each one showed Emma during her delivery job, outside restaurants, crossing streets, waiting at bus stops, buying groceries. Always alone, Alexander's hands clenched into fists. They watched her and did nothing. "Our investigators believe they weren't interested in hurting her. They were waiting for you to reveal your relationship." Alexander slowly stood. "Increase security. Double it. No one approaches Emma without clearance." "Yes, sir." And quietly, "I don't want her frightened." Meanwhile, Emma decided to walk through the estate gardens. The fresh air felt wonderful. Birds sang from tall oak trees. The morning breeze carried the scent of blooming roses. She finally felt peaceful. As she reached a small lake, she noticed the elderly security guard from yesterday sitting on a bench. Emma smiled. "Mr. Howard?" The old man stood immediately. "Mrs. Reed," she laughed. "Please, just Emma." Howard chuckled. "I suppose old habits are hard to break." Emma sat beside him. "I never got to thank you properly." Howard shook his head. "You already did." You smiled. They sat quietly for a moment, watching ducks glide across the water. Finally, Howard spoke. "You know, I've worked for powerful families my entire life. I've met celebrities, politicians, billionaires, but kindness," he smiled, "that's much rarer." Emma looked down. "I didn't do anything special." Howard looked at her. "Exactly. You stayed kind, even after people treated you badly. That's real strength." Emma quietly absorbed his words. Inside the mansion, Grace rushed toward Alexander. "Sir, you need to see this." She handed him a tablet. The video from yesterday had exploded overnight. 23 million views. News channels were replaying it. Social media was flooded with comments. But something had changed. Someone had uploaded another video. This one showed the elderly security guard protecting Emma. Another showed Alexander running through the rain. Public opinion had completely shifted. Millions of people were now asking one question: Who is the pregnant delivery girl? Alexander looked thoughtful. We still haven't released her identity. Grace nodded. No. Good. We'll let Emma decide. Before Grace could respond, another notification appeared. Her face turned pale. Sir, Alexander looked at the screen. It was a breaking news headline. Unknown sources claim Reed Global CEO has secret wife. His eyes narrowed. They're moving faster than expected. Across the city, inside a luxurious penthouse, a man in his late 50s calmly poured himself a glass of whiskey. His name was Richard Blackwood, chairman of Blackwood Industries, Alexander's oldest business rival. He smiled as the television replayed yesterday's footage. So, you finally showed the world your weakness. One of his assistants asked, should we proceed? Richard nodded slowly. I don't want the woman harmed. I want Alexander distracted. If he's protecting his family, he won't notice what we're taking from his company. The assistant smiled. Our acquisition team is ready. Richard raised his glass. Excellent. Back at Reed Manor, Emma was helping Chef Maria prepare lunch. I can chop the vegetables. Maria laughed. Not a chance. You're carrying my future honorary grandchild. Emma smiled. At least let me wash something. Before Maria could answer, the mansion's emergency security alarm suddenly echoed through every hallway. Beep, 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 beep. Every employee froze. Alexander immediately ran into the kitchen. What happened? One of the security officers rushed in. Unidentified drone over the property, another officer shouted. It's heading toward the nursery. Emma's heart stopped. The nursery? Alexander immediately grabbed her hand. Stay behind me. Outside, security teams sprinted across the gardens. The drone hovered silently above the mansion. Then, instead of attacking, it released a small black envelope tied beneath it. The drone immediately flew away before anyone could intercept it. Minutes later, the envelope was brought inside. Alexander carefully opened it. Only one piece of paper lay inside. No fingerprints, no signature, just one handwritten sentence. Now the whole world knows where to find your family. Silence filled the room. Emma instinctively held her stomach. Alexander looked at the note, then at his wife, then at their unborn child. His voice became colder than anyone had ever heard. I've spent my life protecting my company. He slowly folded the letter. But from this moment forward, my family comes first. Outside the mansion gates, hidden behind dark sunglasses, the mysterious watcher smiled from inside his parked sedan. Phase 1 had begun. The warning letter lay on Alexander's desk. No fingerprints, no signature. Just 7 chilling words. Now the whole world knows where to find your family. No one in the room spoke. Emma gently wrapped both arms around her stomach. The baby kicked softly, almost as if sensing the tension. Alexander immediately noticed. He walked over and carefully placed his hand over hers. Our little one is stronger than we think. Emma tried to smile. I hope so. Alexander looked into her eyes. No, I know so. Within minutes, Reed Manor transformed into a fortress. Security vehicles surrounded every entrance. Drone detection systems activated. Motion sensors were upgraded. Additional guards arrived from Reed Global's private security division. The head of security, Daniel Brooks, entered the living room carrying a digital tablet. Mr. Reed, we've locked down the entire estate. Alexander nodded. And the drone? Daniel shook his head. It disappeared before local authorities could track it. Grace stepped forward. The media is already asking questions. Alexander answered calmly. They'll receive none. My family's privacy isn't for sale. Emma quietly walked toward one of the large windows. Outside, she watched security officers patrolling the gardens. Just yesterday, she had been delivering food on an old scooter. Today, armed professionals guarded every corner of her home. The sudden change felt overwhelming. Alexander noticed the expression on her face. He walked beside her. What are you thinking? Emma sighed softly. I miss being invisible. Alexander looked at the garden. I know. She turned toward him. Yesterday, people ignored me. Today, they'll only see your last name. Alexander gently took both of her hands. I don't want the world to know you because you're my wife. I want them to know you because of who you are. Emma smiled faintly. I'd rather they never knew me at all. Later that afternoon, Alexander insisted on taking Emma to her postponed prenatal appointment. This time, there would be no delivery scooter, no buses, no waiting in the rain. A secure convoy escorted them to one of Chicago's finest private hospitals. As they entered the maternity wing, doctors and nurses immediately greeted them. But Alexander quietly stopped them. Please, treat my wife exactly like every other mother. The staff nodded respectfully. Emma smiled at him. Thank you. The examination room felt peaceful. Dr. Sarah Collins carefully checked the baby's heartbeat. A rhythmic sound filled the room. Thump, thump, thump. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Alexander stared silently at the monitor. For a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without emotion, 3 tiny heartbeats nearly brought him to tears. Dr. Collins smiled warmly. Your baby is healthy, growing beautifully. Emma let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Alexander squeezed her hand. Then the doctor looked at Emma more seriously. You've been under a great deal of stress. Emma nodded quietly. I've been working. Dr. Collins looked at Alexander. No more. She needs rest, proper meals. And peace, Alexander answered without hesitation. She'll have all 3. As they left the hospital, a young nurse hurried toward them. Mrs. Reed? Emma turned. The nurse looked nervous. I'm sorry if this is inappropriate. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an old delivery receipt. You delivered dinner to my apartment 3 months ago. Emma looked surprised. I did? The nurse smiled. I was crying because I'd just finished a 16-hour shift. You noticed. You wrote something on the paper bag before leaving. Emma couldn't remember. The nurse unfolded the faded paper. Written in blue ink were simple words. You don't have to be perfect. Just don't give up. The nurse wiped away tears. I kept it. It helped me through the hardest months of my life. Emma stood speechless. She had written those words without thinking. A small act of kindness. Forgotten by her, remembered forever by someone else. Alexander quietly watched the moment. His heart swelled with pride. This was the woman he had fallen in love with. Not because she was extraordinary, because she made ordinary people feel seen. Across the hospital lobby, a man wearing a baseball cap pretended to read a newspaper. Inside his jacket was a tiny camera. He quietly photographed Alexander. Emma, the doctor, the security team. Every movement, as soon as the couple left. He made a phone call. They're leaving now. The cold voice on the other end asked, Is the woman safe? Yes. And the baby? Healthy. The caller chuckled. Perfect. The spy frowned. I thought you said no one would be hurt, the voice answered calmly. I meant it. Our target has never been Emma. It's Alexander. The call ended that evening, back at Reed Manor. Alexander stood alone in his office. He looked at a framed ultrasound picture resting on his desk. Then he opened a secure file labeled Project PHONX. Were confidential documents, emergency relocation plans, save houses, private airfields, international security contacts. He quietly signed the first authorization page. If the threats became real, he was prepared to disappear with his family overnight. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emma stepped inside. She was holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She smiled. I figured the CEO could use a break. Alexander laughed softly. The CEO definitely could. She handed him a mug, then noticed the classified files. Working again? Alexander closed the folder. Just making sure our future stays safe. Emma walked over and rested her head against his shoulder. For several peaceful minutes, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees surrounding Reed Manor, hidden beyond the estate walls. A black SUV sat quietly in the darkness. Inside, Richard Blackwood watched the mansion through binoculars. His assistant asked, Should we begin phase 2? Richard slowly smiled. No, not yet. I want Alexander to enjoy this happiness. He lowered the binoculars. The farther someone falls, the louder the world hears the impact. The SUV disappeared into the night, while inside the brightly lit mansion, Emma and Alexander had no idea. The most dangerous chapter of their lives was about to begin. Morning sunlight spilled across Reed Manor, painting the marble floors in soft gold. For the first time in what felt like forever, the house was quiet. Emma stood in the nursery, gently rocking the empty chair Alexander had bought months earlier. One hand rested on her growing baby bump while the other held the tiny pair of baby socks she had found in a drawer. She smiled. They're so small. Alexander stepped into the room, carrying 2 cups of warm milk. So are babies. Emma laughed. You sound like an expert. I'm trying. She looked around the nursery. You really planned all of this before I moved here? Alexander nodded. Every weekend, even when I couldn't see you. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You were preparing for our future, and I thought I was facing everything alone. Alexander gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. You were never alone. I just wasn't beside you. Downstairs, the atmosphere was very different. Daniel Brooks, the head of security, entered the conference room carrying a thick folder. Alexander joined him. What do we have? Daniel spread several photographs across the table. They weren't only watching Mrs. Reed. Alexander frowned. What do you mean? Daniel pointed to the first photo. It showed Emma buying groceries weeks earlier. The second, she was helping an elderly man carry heavy bags across a parking lot. The third, she was giving her own lunch to a homeless veteran outside a subway station. The fourth, she was paying for a little boy's medicine at a pharmacy. Alexander stared silently. Daniel looked surprised. Sir, did you know about these? Alexander slowly shook his head. No. The room fell silent. Every photograph revealed another act of kindness, things Emma had never mentioned, things she had done expecting nothing in return. Grace quietly smiled. Mrs. Reed changes lives without realizing it. Alexander carefully gathered the photographs. Lock these away. They belong to our family. Meanwhile, Emma decided to bake cookies with Chef Maria. Flour covered the kitchen counter. Butter melted in a warm bowl. For the first time in months, laughter echoed through the mansion. You put too much chocolate, Maria laughed. Emma grinned. There's no such thing. Just then, one of the younger housemaids rushed into the kitchen. Mrs. Reed. There are visitors. Emma looked confused. I wasn't expecting anyone. Maria walked to the front entrance. When the doors opened, everyone froze. Nearly 20 people stood outside. Some carried flowers, others held handmade cards. Several held small gift baskets. Emma stepped forward. Can I help you? An elderly woman smiled. You already did. Emma looked puzzled. A middle-aged man spoke next. 3 years ago, my restaurant was about to close. You ordered meals every Friday even when you barely had money. Emma slowly remembered. It was your little diner. The man nodded. Those Friday orders kept my staff employed during the winter. Another woman stepped forward, holding a baby. You don't remember me, but when I lost my wallet on the bus, you paid for my groceries. A teenage girl smiled shyly. You helped me study for my nursing entrance exam while waiting for your food deliveries. One after another. Complete strangers shared stories, small moments, tiny acts of kindness. Each one had seemed insignificant to Emma, yet together, they had changed dozens of lives. Emma covered her mouth, overwhelmed. I never expected anyone to remember. The elderly woman smiled. We remembered because nobody else stopped. Tears streamed down Emma's cheeks. Alexander had quietly walked into the hallway. He watched without interrupting. His chest tightened with emotion. This wasn't because she was the CEO's wife. These people had come because of Emma, the real Emma. One little boy stepped forward carrying a crumpled drawing. He couldn't have been older than 7. I made this for your baby. Emma knelt carefully. The drawing showed three stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. Above them, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Kind people make the world brighter." Emma hugged the little boy. "Thank you." Alexander looked away for a moment, blinking back tears. Later that afternoon, Daniel entered Alexander's office once again. His face was serious. "We've identified the drone manufacturer." Alexander looked up. "Any leads?" "It was purchased using fake documents." But he placed another file on the desk. "We found something more important." Alexander opened it. Inside was a financial report. Millions of dollars had quietly disappeared from one of Reed Global's overseas subsidiaries over the last 6 months. His expression hardened. "This wasn't random." Daniel nodded. "No. Someone has been attacking your company while keeping you distracted." Alexander immediately understood. The threats, the drone, the surveillance. It was all meant to pull my attention away. Grace entered quickly. "Sir, the board has called an emergency meeting. They're demanding your immediate attendance." Alexander closed the file. "They've chosen their timing well." Grace hesitated. "Should I prepare the helicopter?" Alexander looked through the office window toward the garden. Emma was outside laughing with the little boy who had given her the drawing. For a brief moment, the world felt peaceful. Then his phone vibrated. An unknown number. He answered. A calm voice spoke. "Good afternoon, Mr. Reed." Alexander remained silent. The caller continued. "You've been protecting the wrong thing." The line went dead. Alexander slowly lowered the phone. His instincts told him something terrible had just begun. He looked toward the garden again. Emma smiled as butterflies fluttered around the flowers. Completely unaware that someone had just declared war against everything Alexander had built, Alexander ended the call without saying a word. He stood in silence, looking through the window at Emma, laughing with the little boy in the garden. The anonymous voice had tried to frighten him. Instead, it reminded him what truly mattered. He turned to Grace. "Call the board. The meeting will happen tonight. And invite our internal audit team, legal department, and independent investigators." Grace nodded. "Yes, sir." That evening, the executive boardroom at Reed Global Holdings was unusually tense. Some directors whispered to each other. Others avoided eye contact. No one knew why Alexander had called an emergency meeting. When he entered the room, everyone stood. He took his seat at the head of the table. Without a single greeting, he pressed a button on the remote. A large screen lit up. Financial records appeared. Transfer after transfer. Hide accounts. Fake invoices. Shell companies. The room fell silent. Alexander looked around slowly. Someone inside this company has been stealing from Reed Global for months. Several executives shifted nervously. The independent investigators began distributing sealed folders. One by one, the evidence pointed toward a small group of senior executives who had secretly worked with Richard Blackwood's organization to manipulate contracts and divert company funds. The chairman of the audit committee spoke firmly. "The evidence has been independently verified. There will be referrals to law enforcement and immediate termination of those involved." No shouting followed. No dramatic confrontation. Only quiet accountability. Alexander stood. "My company was built on trust. If we lose that, we've already lost everything." Security officers escorted the individuals out of the room. The remaining employees watched in silence. Meanwhile, Richard Blackwood sat in his penthouse, waiting for news that Alexander had fallen into chaos. Instead, his phone rang. His legal advisor spoke first. "Our offices have been served with warrants. Our financial records are being examined. Our investors are pulling back." Richard's confident smile disappeared. "What?" "The investigation uncovered the network. The plan has collapsed." For the first time in years, Richard realized he had underestimated the one thing money could never buy: integrity. A week later, the viral video that had once humiliated Emma was no longer the story people remembered. Instead, Millions shared another video. It showed the elderly security guard holding an umbrella over a soaked pregnant delivery driver. It showed strangers apologizing. It showed ordinary people choosing kindness. News outlets called it one of the year's most inspiring stories. But Emma wasn't interested in interviews. She politely declined every television appearance. "I don't want to become famous," she told Alexander. "I just want a peaceful life." He smiled. "And that's exactly what we'll build." A month later, Alexander and Emma visited the small apartment where she had once lived. The landlord was surprised to see them. Emma smiled warmly. "I came to say thank you." The landlord looked embarrassed. "I wasn't always patient." "I know," Emma replied gently. "But everyone deserves another chance to do better." She handed him an envelope. Inside was enough money to renovate the aging apartment building. "There are families here who need a safe place to live. No names. No publicity. Just help them." The landlord stood speechless. The elderly security guard, Howard, received an unexpected invitation. When he arrived at Reed Global headquarters, Alexander greeted him personally. "I have a question," Alexander said. Howard smiled. "Go ahead. Would you consider becoming Director of Community Relations for our new Employee Assistance Foundation?" Howard blinked. "I'm 72. Alexander laughed. "Kindness doesn't have a retirement age." Howard accepted with tears in his eyes. Over the next year, Reed Global introduced new programs for expecting mothers, delivery workers, and employees facing financial hardship: emergency healthcare support, paid family leave, scholarships for nursing students, safe housing assistance. Thousands of families benefited. Emma quietly volunteered with the foundation, visiting hospitals and community centers, the same way she had long before anyone knew her name. She never asked for recognition. She simply kept helping people. On a crisp autumn morning, the nursery at Reed Manor was finally filled with the sound they had dreamed about. A healthy baby girl opened her eyes for the first time. Alexander gently placed his daughter in Emma's arms. The tiny baby wrapped her fingers around her father's hand. Alexander smiled through happy tears. "Welcome home, little one." Emma looked at their daughter, then at Alexander. This is everything." Outside the hospital window, the city continued its busy rhythm. Delivery drivers hurried through the streets. Security guards greeted strangers. Parents carried children home. Life moved forward. But somewhere among those ordinary moments, someone who had watched Emma's story remembered to show patience instead of judgment. Someone offered an umbrella. Someone chose compassion over cruelty. And that small choice, just like Emma had always believed, had the power to change a life. Like, subscribe, and support my channel. I really need your support. If you enjoy my video, please share it and leave your feedback in the comments.